the first thing that I think no one tells you when you move to Mexico is that there are certain people you should tell and celebrate that you've moved abroad, but there are other people that you should not. And I'm talking about some of the institutions that you deal with. When you leave the country, you're still going to maintain connections back home. And it's a true story. Someone dashed into the Lake Chapala Society a few weeks ago in a uh, in a in a condition of panic because she had just been making phone calls to different organizations she worked with back home to disastrous consequences. Number one, she told her financial planner, well, we've done it. We finally moved overseas. And the financial planner said, I'm sorry, I cannot help you anymore. So that cost her that relationship. And she had to either, walk that back or start over, because some financial planners, especially if they're fiduciaries, may not be able to help you anymore if you are not living in the United States. The second thing she did was she called her Medicare Advantage provider and told them that she had moved to Mexico, and they immediately canceled her account because you must be a US resident. And then just to cap things off, she thought she'd alert her bank that she had moved overseas. And a lot of banks don't like to hear that either. So they wanted to close her banking account. So I guess my number one is there's people that you're going to have to sort of play the game with to let them believe that you're still living up north, because there could be some real consequences if you disclose to them that you have left the United States in terms of where you're living full time. It's better just a topic you don't discuss with them. The second, I think, thing that no one tells you, and I probably should, is bringing your car to Mexico is a major hassle. And it's something that you could really avoid by simply purchasing a car once you're down here. Years ago, it was fairly easy to import a car into Mexico and have it normalized, which means basically have it plated in Mexico. But as the NAFTA agreement fully kicked in and got stronger, the three countries in NAFTA jointly decided that they wanted to place restrictions on how automobiles moved around the three countries. And basically, if your car is not a NAFTA built car, meaning a US, Canadian, or Mexico made vehicle, you are not going to be able to bring that vehicle and legalize it into Mexico. You're going to be able to bring it in, depending on your immigration status, for short-term stays, but you're going to have to take that vehicle to the border physically every 6 months and get something called a TIP, the TIP, renewed. And I'm not going to go into details on that. There are websites that cover this thing extensively. But my point is, you can buy essentially any car you can get in the United States, maybe not the color of the seat level you want, a seat color you want, but you can get any vehicle here essentially. And that includes all the Asian and German imports. Remember that Audi, Volkswagen, and Porsche are made now in Mexico. All the Japanese automobile makers are making cars in Mexico. About 20 miles from where we live here in Ajijic, there is a Honda plant that's producing the majority of all the CRVs. And you see a lot of CRVs around the Lakeshore area because they're made here very, very locally. So my recommendation is don't try and import your car. Buy a car once you're in Mexico. Electric cars are becoming very popular now, so you can buy Teslas here. There's even a Mexico-made electric car that's coming out of the market. The third thing that no one tells you that I think is important to know is that a lot of people spend a lot of money bringing their possessions down here. And most of the heavy possessions like furniture, for example, or antiques, or things you just can't let go of, are going to cost you a lot of money to get down here. There's chance they're going to be damaged during shipping, which is always a risk. And essentially, if you're starting a new home in Mexico, there's certain things you're going to want to take, but packing up your household and bringing it down here is going to be a huge expense. And a lot of what you're going to bring down, you will question later why you, in fact, did that. Remember, Mexico is a developing country, but our economy here is so linked to the US economy in terms of being able to access goods and services and familiar products that you're essentially going to be able to replace and get anything you would need in Mexico that you would have brought down here. I know there's exceptions in some things, but a typical move of a 3-bedroom house from the U.S. to Mexico can cost you $15,000 to $20,000, and with that kind of budget here in Mexico, you could go on quite a shopping spree, buying new and used items in your new country. The third thing I'll mention, just to get through this fairly quickly, is that your health care after you've moved to Mexico, depending on your age, is almost inevitably going to be a two-nation healthcare solution. Okay, you're going to rely on your north of the border plan and some sort of strategy for south of the border. Okay, going all in on the Mexican system or all in on the U.S. system is just not going to be in your interests. So the other factor in this is that once you reach age 65, it's almost impossible to buy private insurance through one of these international companies that sells policies that are good all over the world. And number two, even Mexico's Social Security medical care system, according to what I read, it's very affordable, only about $600 a year. However, if you have any sort of medical pre-existing conditions, your application will be denied. Now, and that's not an exclusion. That's if you go in and say that, I had, a bout of skin cancer, or I have diabetes, something a lot more serious, your entire ability to be in that plan can be denied. So what that means is a lot of people age 65 and older really do need to sort of cobble together a plan that usually looks something like this. You go out of pocket for your for your Mexico doctor visits, medications, and lab work. They're all significantly cheaper than what you use back home. And you maintain your Medicare program. I'm speaking to US citizens here, and you invest in a Medicare Advantage program. Okay. So your Medicare is going to be used when you're planning your annual or twice or 3 times annual trips back home. And the Advantage program can, in some instances, be used for emergencies and accidents while you're in Mexico. Okay. So what you're really trying to avoid with medical care expenses is expensive hospitalizations. The care you will get here is extremely good, and you will pay out of pocket for that. However, a hospitalization can cost into the tens of thousands of dollars, depending on what the status of that is. The other part of the juggling both sides of the border here would be considering a Med-Evac plan. And Med-Evac plans are very popular here, wherever there's an expat community. And of course, the premiums are somewhat expensive. They're very affordable compared to what it would cost you to basically pay cash for an air ambulance to fly you back to the United States. But that insurance plan can also help you if you want to stay tied to the U.S. medical system. And in some ways, we just all have to do that. We have to use both of those systems to our advantage, the Mexico system and the system back home. The other thing I would say is things that no one tells you that, and this, please take this in the light that it is intended, but when you move to Mexico, you're basically moving to a country where there's essentially no law enforcement and a justice system that really just provides very little justice for victims of crimes. And, I love how someone said a few years ago, they said how the Mexican people must be the most honest people in the world. And why is that? Because they essentially live in a civil society that works and is one of the 15 largest economies on the planet Earth, okay, 126 million people. But that happens in a system where there's essentially no law enforcement. The closest you'll come to law enforcement is the traffic cop who, will oftentimes prey on drivers for doing very conspicuous things that are against the law. But to expect that you're going to have a US or Canadian law enforcement system that's patrolling, that's solving crimes, that's preventing crimes from happening because they're doing, the hard detective work, that just doesn't happen in Mexico. And what that means is safety a lot of times, and protecting yourself has a lot more to do with personal responsibility, has to do with getting to know the neighbors that you're living with. and it involves taking responsibility and being very careful, especially when you are in public, operating a vehicle, walking on sidewalks in 16th century colonial towns. There's really much more of a responsibility on you, the individual, than it is for a system or an insurance or a lawsuit regiment that's going to, step in and provide you with protection. But you will not see conspicuous law enforcement essentially anywhere in Mexico, and nor will you find that there's a lot of detective work being done to prevent crime. It's really up to the Mexican citizens themselves. So that's something that a lot of people are not prepared for, but it is a reality of living here. And I'll just wrap up with my final thing that no one tells you is that, you really can get anything here. Meaning, maybe there aren't 50 kinds of toothpaste when you go into the Walmart or wherever you end up doing your shopping, but the connection between the U.S. economy and Mexico make it a very soft landing here in terms of being able to get stuff that you're used to back home. So as foreign and exotic as Mexico is, it is also, extremely familiar. And part of that is because of the availability of products that, if you move to Thailand, if you move to Portugal, you move to Ecuador, you're going to be kind of starting over. But here in Mexico, you're going to be able to fall into very similar products on the supermarket shelves. And thanks to online shopping with things like Amazon.mx, and I've mentioned this before, but you can essentially find any product that you would be longing to find back up north. So those are my 5 things. But there's a slew of other ones that many people would mention. And there's a good article I found on this, so I'm going to mention them just real quickly too. Basic utilities are not always reliable. Okay, so that's something. There are electrical outages. There are times of day when, especially during the rainy season, where you have power lines or transformers that go down. You have hurricane seasons on both coasts. And so, the good news is that most Mexican homes are gas tanks that are at your residence and then need to get filled up all the time. Kind of a hassle, but at least your gas is on your property. It's not a line, miles away that can be interrupted. So utilities, though, especially electricity, can come and go.